Conas, how are ye? Welcome back to the Candlelit Tales podcast where we tell Irish myth set to original music. My name is Aaron and I'm one half of the storytelling duo that makes up this company, and in this episode we continue the Fianna series that we're running this year called the Fianna Saga. And this story is called Fionn's Harper. It's about one of the little dudes, one of the fairies, and he plays music. That's a good story. To listen to our reflections and our chats about these stories, you can support this podcast at the same time. You can join our Candlelit crew by following the links in the description below. Find the show notes, click on them. Go on, go ahead, like, subscribe, share them. You know the thing. Now, Sorka, tell us a story, will you?
It was winter, and it was time for the Fianna to tell the stories of their summer exploits, and they were in the hall of the king. And the king had a harper, a short man with nimble fingers that raced across the strings. And Dove turned to Fionn at a certain point and said, "Why don't you have a harper?" Fionn looked back, with amusement but also a little exasperation. It seemed to him that she was needling, and he asked her, "Why would I have a harper?" And Dove said, "All great leaders have harpers. Are you not a great leader?" Fionn sighed. But Dove went on. "In fact, the greater the leader, the smaller the harper. That's what it seems to be anyway." Now Louis Loga took a little bit of umbrage at this. He was not a tall man, and he was a little sensitive about the fact, and so he said, "What do you mean by that? Do you mean to say that all short men should be harpers?" And Dove looked at him, wide-eyed, and said, "Well, what else are they good for?" And most of the rest of the night devolved into bickering. But it stayed with Fionn, in the back of his mind. Shouldn't he have a harper? Should he have a harper? The leader of the Fianna was not a king per se, though he was a leader and a captain, and the Fianna was growing under him and shaping into something altogether wonderful. Should he have a harper? Or was the harper the first step to having a hall? And the hall a short step from being yet another king on yet another hill, in the land with so many kings on so many hills. So he decided not to seek out a harper. But if one should turn up, well, that would be different. In the following winter, they went to the same king, and he asked Fionn, "Did you ever find a harper of your own?" And Fionn smiled and reached into the fold of his cloak and produced an extraordinary sight. A tiny man. He was the height of Fionn's fists 4 times. 4 fists high. And he had a harp that was 3 fists high. And he bowed very prettily to the king, and he announced that his name was Cnú de Rôl, and he was the harper of the Fianna. The king asked Fionn how this had come about, and so Fionn told him, while Cnú de Rôl played the harp to liven the telling. That summer he'd been out hunting, he and Cuillte and Conan Whale, and they'd heard the strangest sound. They heard music that was playing and then stopping. And as they got closer, they realised that the times that the music stopped, someone was weeping. And as they got closer still, they realised that this music was terribly sweet. So sweet that it had that effect, that soporific effect that fairy music has, to turn the listener's mind to sleep. And Cuillte started to drag his feet, and Conan lay down and wrapped his cloak around him and declared he would go no further without a nap. And Fionn knew something of fairy harpers, and so he held his spear in front of his forehead and went cautiously, step by step. and every time his head nodded, pricked against the spear and woke him up. He came to a little clearing, and there he saw the little man, the tiny harper playing the tiny harp, and every so often leaving off to weep. Fionn called out to him from a distance, not wanting to startle him, and asked him, "Are you all right? Do you need help?" The little man startled and leapt to his feet and looked up at this giant, to his eyes towering over him, and he cried out. He said, I'm exiled. I came here with other harpers of the Tuatha De Danann, my people. For I am of the Tuatha De Danann. I am the son of Lugh Fala. I am of a great lineage of kings. I came here with my fellow musicians. I thought to make music, to explore the mortal realm, to gain some inspiration, but it turned out it was all a ruse. They were jealous of me. And so they left me here, stranded me here, and went away back under hill without me, and I don't know how to get home. And Fionn's mind went back to Dardov in the feasting hall and that question he had of, should he have a harper? And so he reached out his hand to the little man and said, well, if you're lost and alone, you can come with me. You can come with me in the Fianna. We'll take you in. You can play music for us. A harper's always welcome in any hall. And so Cnut the Roll agreed. And now Fionn looked at Dardov across the feasting hall and smiled. Now he, Fionn McCool, had the smallest harper anyone had ever seen. Cnut the Roll's skill was, of course, incredible. This harper of the Fianna, who could put listeners to sleep with the sweetness of his music. He could play all the strains that were important. The music of laughter and the music of weeping, as well as the music of sleep. Some time later, just as the winter was coming to a close, Cnut the Roll came to Fionn. And Fionn could see the little man was nervous, for he shifted from foot to foot. And he looked up at Fionn and he said, have I served you well, Fionn McCool? And Fionn said, you have, Cnut the Roll, you have been a wonderful harper to me. And the little man said, and would you mind if I asked you a very great favour? Fionn said, of course, ask anything. Cnut the Roll shuffled his feet some more and cleared his throat a few times and looked into space as if the words were hanging there if he could but look hard enough for them, and then looked back to Fionn McCool and said, I know that I am not strictly a man of the Fianna, as I am not a warrior, and I know that the Fianna take oaths never to marry except for true love. And, well, I wonder if I am supposed to follow those rules. Fionn cocked his head at the little man and asked him, are you in love, my harper? Cnut the Roll blushed red as a beet and said, well, there is a maiden of the Tuatha De Danann, and I met her long ago before my exile, and yes, I have loved her from afar for a long time. She's tall and slender and stately and beautiful and talented as well. Fionn McCool, she is the first among all of the Tuatha De Danann ladies, and she has held my heart these many years. But she is beyond my reach. Do you know where she is? Fionn asked him, and Cnut the Roll sighed again and said she dwells in the House of Don. Now that was a name well known to Fionn McCool, of course. The House of Don was a place that conjured fear for mortals, though it was not in itself a terrible place. It was a dwelling place, a resting place for the dead, as they travelled first into the other world. They could gather at the house of Don and they could stay there a while, a short while or a long while, as they needed before they moved on. But still, the idea of death draws chills to a mortal, and Fionn felt it too. "And you're sure," he asked Cnut the Role, "that your beloved dwells in the house of Don, and not anywhere else?" The little Harper sighed again. She was there and she was nowhere else. Now it was coming up to springtime, it was coming up to Bealtaine, and that's a time of year when the veil is very thin. And so Fionn McCool gathered his Fianna and asked them who would come with him on this dread adventure to this dread place to win the true love of Cnut the Role, their Harper. And more of them agreed to come than didn't. And so Fionn led the Fianna south to Munster, to the Beara Peninsula, where he knew the entrance to the house of Don lay from the mortal world. And there they camped and there they waited, early for the Fianna to leave the halls of the king. But they had to wait on the threshold a long time. For it was at Bealtaine that the veil was thin and would lift. And Fionn waited for that moment. And he had carried Cnut the Role with him in the fold of his cloak, and he took the little Harper out and laid him down so that at dusk at Bealtaine the Harper began to play. And the Fianna were there to see as the side of the rock opened up and warmth and light spilled out as if there were a great feasting hall hidden just behind those stones. And Cnut the Role played his harp and played his music of sleep. And they could hear a babble of voices coming out of that hill, and then they heard the babble trail off into yawns and shuffles as one by one the fairy host inside, the recently departed dead among them, lay down and slept. And Fionn instructed Cnut the Role to keep playing and not to stop, and he crept inside the hill, some of the Fianna along with him, and they began to search for Cnut the Role's beloved. Now all they had to go on was the Harper's description, and the Harper was a man in love, and thus did not give very useful descriptions, for he said that she was the loveliest, and there were many lovely women of the other world asleep under that hill. And he insisted she was the most talented, but they could not gauge the talent of a woman asleep. And finally, Conan Moyle noticed a very small figure. He nudged Fionn McCool in the ribs and pointed to her. And Fionn shook his head, for Cnut the Role had said that she was tall, but Conan silently grasped Fionn's fist and measured her. She was 5 fists high. Cnut the Role was 4. Tall to him, mouthed Conan, and Fionn gently lifted the tiny figure. And they carried her outside, and Cnut the Role kept playing from Fionn's shoulder quite a while until they were away from the house of Don. And then Fionn left the couple alone. And when she woke, the little woman, she flung her arms around the Harper and covered his face with kisses and said, "I have been waiting for you these many years." And Cnut the Role introduced her to the Fianna. And he and his fairy wife lived with Fionn McCool a long time after that. And Fionn had such a fondness for the tiny couple. Whenever it rained or the wind blew too hard, he would shelter them in the fold of his cloak. And after a while he thought, I could always build a hole. And that way they'd be sheltered always.